The night was colder than usual, and the rain fell harder than it had in years. Inside a broken-down car on the side of a dark highway, a man sat clutching the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. His name was Daniel Carter, a single father who had already lost too much. His wife was gone, taken by a cruel accident 2 years ago. His only light left in this world was his little girl, Emily, a fragile, bright-eyed 7-year-old who believed her father could fix anything. But tonight, Daniel wasn't sure if he could fix what had just happened. The car's engine had died on their way home, miles from town. And before Daniel could even call for help, a sudden flash flood began sweeping across the road. In an instant, the car was surrounded by rising water. Emily was trapped in her seat, screaming for her father as he tried desperately to free her. His fingers shook, his heart raced, and every second felt like a battle against time. Then, as if fate itself had intervened, a shadow appeared through the storm, a woman, soaked to the bone, fighting her way through the current. She shouted something Daniel couldn't hear, then threw herself toward the car window. With a strength that didn't match her small frame, she helped Daniel pull Emily out through the window, holding the terrified child against her chest as the floodwaters swallowed everything around them. The woman guided them to a nearby embankment, coughing, shivering, and gasping for air. Daniel turned to thank her, but she was already gone. If you believe in kindness, miracles, and second chances, then take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because stories like this remind us that even strangers can become angels when the world turns dark. For Daniel, that night changed everything. He and Emily were rescued by authorities hours later, but the mysterious woman who had saved Emily's life was never found. There were no footprints, no name, no trace, just the memory of a soaked figure in the storm, holding his daughter as if she were her own. In the following days, Daniel tried to go back to his routine. He fixed cars for a living at a small repair shop in the outskirts of town. He kept busy, partly because he had to, and partly because it was easier than facing the hollow ache inside him. Emily talked about her angel lady all the time, drawing her in crayons, a woman with a kind smile and bright blue scarf. But Daniel couldn't stop wondering, who was she? Why did she vanish without a word? He'd tried everything: news reports, police inquiries, social media posts, but no one came forward. Weeks turned into months, and though life slowly steadied, Daniel's obsession never left him. Every time he saw someone wearing a blue scarf, his heart skipped a beat. Every time it rained, he remembered that night and how his daughter would have been gone if not for a stranger's courage. Then one morning, something unexpected happened. Daniel was dropping Emily off at school when he noticed a young woman across the street helping an old man load groceries into his car. She had the same slender frame, the same kind of scarf, blue, fluttering in the wind. His breath caught. Could it be her? He wanted to call out, but before he could, a bus blocked his view. When it moved, she was gone again. He spent the next few days searching nearby shops, asking around, even showing people Emily's drawing. But no one seemed to recognize her. People began to think he was losing his mind, clinging to the memory of a ghost. But Daniel didn't care. He knew she was real. One night, as he sat by Emily's bedside, watching her sleep, Daniel whispered a promise to himself that he would find the woman who had given his daughter a second chance at life, no matter how long it took. A few days later, fate decided to give him a sign. It came in the form of a newspaper article tucked in the corner of a cafe counter. It was about a volunteer group working in flood-damaged towns nearby, rebuilding homes, rescuing animals, helping families start over. Among the photos, Daniel froze. There she was. Her name, printed below the image, was Leela Thompson. His heart pounded as he read on. Leela was a nurse who had been volunteering since the floods months earlier. She had grown up in the same region but had lost her family years ago in a tragedy of her own. She was known by locals for helping anyone she could, quietly, selflessly, never seeking recognition. Daniel didn't think twice. He took Emily and drove 2 hours to the town mentioned in the article. It was a small, flood-damaged community with half-repaired houses and muddy roads. When they arrived at the volunteer camp, Daniel approached a man carrying supplies. "I'm looking for Leela Thompson," he said. The man smiled faintly. "She's at the old community hall, tending to the kids." When Daniel stepped inside the hall, he froze. There she was, kneeling beside a small boy, cleaning a scrape on his knee. She looked up, and for a moment, her eyes met his. There was confusion at first, then recognition. The air between them seemed to stop moving. Leela stood slowly. "You're the man from the flood," she said softly. Daniel could barely find his voice. "You saved my daughter. I've been searching for you ever since." Leela shook her head gently, almost shyly. "I didn't do anything anyone else wouldn't have done." But Daniel knew that wasn't true. She had done something extraordinary. He introduced her to Emily, who instantly recognized her and ran into her arms. The reunion was quiet but powerful. A moment of pure gratitude and unspoken emotion. Leela smiled through tears as Emily clung to her, whispering, "I missed you, my angel lady." Over the next few hours, they sat together sharing stories about that night and about their lives since. Leela confessed that she'd left right after rescuing them because emergency workers had pulled up, and she didn't want any attention. She had simply walked away into the storm to help others who might still be trapped. Daniel was moved beyond words. As they talked, he saw how selfless she truly was, a woman who had known loss but turned her pain into compassion. And somewhere deep in his heart, he felt something shift. For the first time in years, he felt hope again. In the following weeks, Daniel returned often to volunteer alongside her. He fixed broken vehicles for the community while Leela worked at the makeshift clinic. Emily adored her and spent her afternoons helping hand out supplies. Slowly, the three of them formed a quiet bond, one built on gratitude, trust, and the unspoken understanding of what they had survived together. But just when life began to feel peaceful, tragedy struck again. One afternoon, a second storm rolled through the region, sudden, violent, and devastating. Daniel rushed to the volunteer site, only to find chaos. Trees were down, tents were torn apart, and people were being evacuated. In the confusion, someone shouted that Leela had gone missing while trying to rescue a trapped family near the riverbank. Panic gripped Daniel's chest. Without hesitation, he ran toward the water, ignoring the warnings around him. The rain lashed against his face, blinding him, but he kept going, calling her name through the storm. Finally, he spotted her, waist-deep in water, helping a woman and child onto higher ground. Daniel waded in, grabbed her arm, and pulled her to safety. They collapsed together under the awning of a broken porch, soaked and trembling. Leela tried to laugh through her exhaustion, saying, "You didn't have to come after me." Daniel looked at her, tears mixing with the rain. "You saved my daughter. I wasn't going to lose you too." In that fragile moment, with a storm roaring around them, they both understood something profound, that their lives had become intertwined not by accident, but by grace. When the storm finally passed and calm returned, the town gathered to rebuild once more. Leela continued her work tirelessly, and Daniel stayed by her side. Together, they repaired what nature had broken, not just in the town, but within themselves. Months passed, and the three of them, Daniel, Emily, and Leela, became inseparable. Emily would often say that her angel lady was her best friend, and one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel finally found the words he'd been holding inside since the night he met her. "Leela," he said quietly, "you didn't just save my daughter that night. You saved me too." Tears welled up in her eyes as she took his hand. "And you gave me something to live for again." They stood there in the soft glow of dusk, not as strangers, but as a family that life had stitched together through storms, loss, and unspoken love. Sometimes, fate doesn't give us what we want, it gives us what we need. Daniel had lost everything once, but through a stranger's courage he found hope, healing, and a new beginning. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because in a world that can feel cold and broken, stories of kindness and courage remind us that there's still good out there. Cloud Special request a comment below what you would do if a stranger ever changed your life forever. Would you search for them, thank them, or pay their kindness forward? I'd love to read your thoughts. And as Daniel, Leela, and little Emily watched the sunset that evening, the same sky that had once raged above them now calm and golden, one thing was clear: sometimes the people who save us appear out of nowhere, only to remind us that hope was never lost, it was just waiting to be found.